It started.
Okay. So this is a 2018 Hayabusa, pretty much completely stock here at the moment. Has the stock ECU in it at the moment here. I just want to show that the bike will run. Pause it. All right, so there it was running on the stock stuff. The plan is to put on one of my MaxxRace ECU adapter setups, and I'm going to show you that here in just a second. I've got everything kind of laid out. Okay, so here's a MaxxRace ECU with my ECU adapter box that basically will just take place of the stock ECU. So I've got this thing wired up. I've got a whole bunch of different harnesses that you see here, but I'll real briefly try to go over what's what. I have a dash adapter now that will allow full functionality of the stock Suzuki dash. So your gear indicator, your coolant temp, FI light, ABC mode, all that stuff will continue to work, where in the past it did not. We've got EGTs here. Customer asked that I pull 4 of them. You get 8 of them on a MaxxRace, so 4 of those have been pulled. Here's your connector for the wideband O2 sensor. Got a 4-channel Bosch igniter that's going to be mounted over on the tail there, ground wire for it. Then I got a bunch of other harnesses that are going to plug into unused places, unused connectors on the bike. So for example, the pair connector is going to run a shift light here. The O2 connector on the stock harness is going to run a pair of MAC valves for boost, add, and subtract. The MAP sensor, which we don't need on the bike anymore because it has one built into the Max, is going to serve for wastegate pressure. This guy is going to plug into the 4-pin connector that runs the secondary throttle servo, and we're going to get fuel pressure, and then this is a Rife high intake air temp sensor that's going to go inside of the plenum. This is a turbo bike, obviously. This guy is oil pressure. This is going to plug into the secondary throttle position sensor under the tank. And again, like your secondary throttle plates, the servo motor, the secondary throttle sensor are not needed. So those things would be disconnected before you go installing this. I've already disconnected those on this bike. And then I got a couple other things. This is a real easy one. This is just going to hook our horn signal into the Max so that when we push the horn button, we know that we want to do a air shift. And then this guy is going to plug into the SDS connector, and then this will plug into the air switch for the air shifter. And so we'll be able to do auto shift as well as button shifting through the MaxxECU. Okay, so for the purpose of this video, what I'm going to do is take this stuff over to the bike, and I'm going to put just the basic stuff that's required to get the bike running. Not going to worry about mounting any sensors or anything like that. Obviously that would take longer, but wiring wise, all that stuff is going to just plug in. So let's go ahead and put this in this completely stock bike, which inside the stock tail section is a little bit challenging. If you come over this way a little bit, buddy, I just want to show. I've had to trim a few things. Some of the plastic here, I had to trim in here, trim this off, and the customer's going to trim this up nicer. I've got it just enough so that I can get connectors and harnesses and stuff through, but I've got this guy set up to, you can back up some, but you don't have to be so close. Thanks, buddy.
All right.
So I'm going to route his EGTs back here. He's not going to be running those at the present time. I'm basically going to tuck this guy in. I'm going to set the igniter up to go over on the right side over here. So, but if you want to come over this way, all the way around the back end of the bike, buddy, I'll show them come over here. Yeah, don't trip on that. So yeah, this would obviously need a heat sink on it for what I'm doing at the moment. I don't need to do that, but I'll plug this guy in. Customer's going to mount a bracket or something to have this over here. Then I've got a ground wire that I'm going to go ahead and just run up to the battery. Run that up to the battery ground, and then you can go back over there, bud, and I'll work on getting this. Okay, and we're not doing this as any kind of final install or anything like that. This is just to show essentially how easy or difficult the ECU adapter setup is on a Gen 2 Busa. Alright, so we'll tighten this guy up. So essentially now you can see my ECU adapter box. Here, I'm going to go ahead and pop the stock ECU out. Now in order for my box to sit nice and flat, you do have to trim off one of the mounting ears that would normally contain the stock ECU. Don't have any Velcro, I just got a piece of tape here to help hold things a little bit, but normally I'd just put a piece of Velcro or something there to hold that. Okay, so essentially now I've got MaxxECUs in here. This dash adapter, could go here or mount somewhere further out. Again, that's going to allow us the full functionality of the stock Suzuki dash. Got my O2 sensor. I'm going to leave this just dangling right now because I don't have a spot to put a wideband in on this bike as of yet. But what we'll do now, go ahead and pause it for a second. Alright, so we're situated now, basically have everything in. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the key on. If you look over to the left there on my laptop, we're connected to the MaxxECU. Come back over this way, bud. So a couple of things. My dash adapter. So right now, if I take my dash adapter and unplug it, won't take very long, and we'll see that you're going to get check engine basically here. Your coolant gauge isn't going to work. The gear indicator isn't working anymore. Go ahead and show this, bud. So I'm going to go ahead and just plug my dash adapter back in. Dash adapter is getting CAN signals from the MaxxECU, and then it's sending out a serial data stream to be able to control ABC mode, the FI light, the coolant gauge, as well as the gear indicator. So I'll show you here. Let's spin this tire. Nope, just keep looking at the dash there, buddy. There we go. There's first gear, second gear. So that's working. We can see the coolant gauge is reading relatively cold. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and back up now. So now we can see we're running on this MaxxECU race. You can see my plug and play set up. Basically no tuning at all whatsoever yet. No idea what air fuel is, but it's sitting here idling quite well. Come over this way, bud. So we'll see here. We've got some different things configured. Right now, ABC mode I have tied to active boost table. If I hit the mode down button, it's going to go to boost table 1 or A mode. Hit it again, it goes to boost table 2 or B mode. And if I hold the button down, it's going to go to boost table 3 or C mode there. So next thing is, this bike we do have the stepper motor wired in for idle air control. So right now it's basically like fully closed. I'm going to open this up a little bit. And we'll see that our engine RPM is going to raise, or idle RPM is raising up there. I can adjust that. There's closed loop modes. I'm just messing around in test mode, trying to understand how it works presently. But you can see the bike seems to be running pretty darn well. They got the factory dash running. Everything seems to be working there. The next thing I was going to show is just maybe where some of these connections are going to go for this turbo bike anyway. Go ahead and pause it for a second, bud. Okay, so I was just going to show a few places where things plug in. Again, this is like a completely stock bike, except for it has cruise control added to it. Here's the stock pair valve and everything that's actually still intact on this bike. So this connector here, if I pull that off, that's where I would plug in my shift light. So you're going to plug that in and then just run the shift light up to wherever you want to have it on your dash. Then Matthew, if you could follow me around to the other side of the bike, I'll show where some of this other stuff goes. So I mentioned before, the secondary throttle stuff is not needed anymore, and you actually need to take your secondary throttle plates out. And I interface a lot of my extra connectors and stuff through the 4-pin servo motor connector and then the secondary throttle position sensor connector. So I'll show one of them here. Hang on one second. Let's see here. So in the 4-pin servo motor connector, which is buried in here, I would plug this guy in. And that gets me my fuel pressure, and then that gets my intake air temp on this IET sensor. Let's see what else I'm going to show here. Okay, I'm also going to show the stock O2 connector that has 12 volt and then a couple of signals in it. This is where I would plug in my boost control solenoids. So I'm going to plug these guys in, route the boost control solenoids wherever they need to go. Let's see, wastegate pressure, that's going to plug into the stock map sensor, which is normally mounted to the air box, but that would basically plug in right here. That sensor isn't needed because we've got one built into the MaxxECU. Okay, oil pressure, that's going to plug in essentially where the secondary throttle position sensor connector went. So that's just right over here. Kind of hard to see with this big cruise control box that's mounted inside of this thing. Go ahead and pause it. I'm going to show stuff here. So actually take the video up a little bit too. All right, go ahead and hit record.
I already did.
Okay, so then I also have, in this case, here's your SDS connector, the 6-pin diagnostic. This is where I'm actually plugging in his shift output harness. This is what you would hook your air switch to. So it's got 12 volt and then a switch ground that the MaxxECU controls, either based upon the horn button input or an auto shift type scenario where you're doing an RPM based shift automatically. Back over this way, bud. I also have extra, I will supply the mating connector, but the barometric pressure sensor connector here isn't needed on the bike anymore. Again, that stuff's sort of built into the MaxxECU. There's a spare analog output that I have wired here. So you've got 5 volt and sensor ground as well as the signal. So wiring into this sensor is nice and easy. And then this is a 13 and newer bike with ABS, which does not have the 8-pin Yosh diagnostic connector. I can add the stuff to do that. On a 2008 to 2012 bike, I would actually have 2 analog inputs that are routed there. So you see, I try my best to try to route everything to existing places on the bike so that we don't have 100 different harnesses and connections and stuff laying in the tail section of the bike. So I guess I should have mentioned before, you know, this bike has 8 injectors. They're all stock right now. I'm currently wired into all of those with an injector output, so you can do full sequential. I've got the igniters obviously wired in and then goes to all of the stock coils, which you could upgrade those if you want, but guys have made plenty of horsepower with the stockers. All of your stock sensors, like your throttle position, your coolant sensor, your intake air temperature sensor, if you wanted to use that on a motor or a nitrous bike, not a non-turbo bike, all that stuff will all be wired there. You don't have to do anything. I wire in gear position so that you can use the gear indicator as well as doing gear-based, boost or nitrous control. There are options out there to do calculated gear using engine RPM and wheel speed if you don't want to do that. Most customers, I do wire in the speed signal from the dash. Normally the stock Suzuki ECU doesn't get that speed signal. So in order to do anything speed-based inside of the MaxxECU, you have to actually run that signal in. This customer didn't have me do that. This bike is actually here for another setup that we're doing with a race that's actually going to do wheel speeds, front and rear for traction control, laser, wheelie control, all that kind of stuff. But this one's kind of getting the basic turbo bike setup. Okay. And I would like to say thank you very much to my son Matthew for taking the video for me. Thank you, bud. So again, as you can see, fully wiring in all the extra sensors and stuff will obviously take a little bit of work, certainly on this bike because it's so stock and there's so much stuff under the tank right now. Things are really tight on this completely stock subframe and undertail, tail section and everything, but should fit. You got to do a tiny bit of trimming, certainly something like a tiger tail and an extended tail section or something like that. You'd have a whole lot more room and wouldn't be so congested. Not a lot of room left in the trunk for other stuff on this guy. But hey, thanks for watching.